We are now officially recording. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to our Producing an Age of Pandemic peer exchange session. I believe, colleagues, can you remind me, is this session 16 or 15?
16.
16. Wow, my colleagues. All right. So many sessions, so much knowledge shared. Loving it, loving it, loving it. We, of course, are recording this session so that people will be able to view this and participate in this knowledge exchange asynchronously. After this meeting, you're 100% invited to join us for our 15-minute planning session for the next week's meeting. We're going to begin by inviting you to introduce yourselves. This is, to a certain extent, a moment for us to get a lay of the national scene. What's happening across the country? What are all of the different things that we're engaged in, all of the different digital productions in this age of pandemic, or physical productions in physically shared space. So this is a moment to share who you are, where you're coming from. We're a decolonized process, so we request that you add a land acknowledgement. We have a link to, if you're unsure of where your land is, somebody can drop a link in the chat that'll help you to find that. So share who you are, where you're coming from. We also like to invite people to do an access check-in, just to let us know if there's anything we need to know to help make sure this space is more accessible for you. Apologies, we are still working on finding the most cost-efficient in Zoom captioning software solution. So we're still working on that. So this will be captioned in the archive, but it is not captioned inside the session today. Let me know if that is an access issue for anyone inside today's session. And I will kick us off, and I will, of course, share either a challenge or a discovery. And of course, the challenge I'm going to share is captioning. So I'm Claudia Alick. I'm speaking to you from the Bay Area, land of the Ohlone people. The people are still alive. I am coming from the Calling Up Justice transmedia practice. And this week we produced another We Charge Genocide broadcast. And this is an attempt to create a decentralized producing practice where, in theory, anybody could show up and manifest a show with hardly any resources. So we've been experimenting for that project, and frankly for this session, in finding free captioning solutions that auto caption, that don't require a person to have to type. And we had a gigantic technical snafu that is going to create a bunch of labor on the back end for me, because we now have, the show itself was gorgeous, but the live stream is a mess. That broadcast looks like a mess. So I have all this, we had a beautiful event for those of us who were inside the Zoom. I've got amazing footage that I can re-edit into an archival document that will communicate to others mostly what we experienced. But what people see now in the archive is very messy looking, with Chinese characters. Chinese characters that were being shown instead of English language and other technical snafus. So my discovery, or this was we designed it this way on purpose. We always designed it so in the Zoom would always be success, right? And then the other places, if they failed, we would always have a piece of our performance that would be successful. So that was a successful strategy, but we still have to work on this technical stuff. And I'm afraid that our solutions might cost money. And that's me checking in, check. Oh, and we're queuing up in the chat. So please queue yourselves.
I think I'm next. Sabrina Hamilton. I use the pronouns she, her, hers. I'm coming to you from Western Massachusetts, which is the land of the Pecumtuck and Nipmuc peoples. I run the Co-Festival of Performance here. I don't have any access needs at this moment. And you'll be hearing more from me on the field trip, so I think that's enough for me now.
That's me, yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning or afternoon. I'm Joan Lipkin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I don't think I have any access needs right now. I am speaking to you from Osage territory, a otherwise known as St. Louis. And I'm really experimenting with the most productive ways to let people know about the deadline to register to vote, and uh, also to let people know about Medicaid, which is very important for all sorts of folks. And this is really interesting because it kind of relates to our transmedia group. Uh, Emails don't really do it, and phone calls don't really do it. I feel like people are responding to texts more. So yeah, and Claudia's like, yeah. So, we're going to have to figure out all kinds of ways to get our work out, our artistic work, our political work, which is sometimes one and the same. The other thing that I want to plant is that we're going to want to find somebody who can help us caption our our dance videos that we're commissioning from artists of color, to make sure that those are really accessible. And I'm hoping that somebody in the group can help us when those come in. And with that, I will pass to our friend Peter. Thanks.
Thank you, friend Joan. Good morning, afternoon, or maybe good mafternoon for a non-time zone. Greeting Peter Friedrich, he, him, his, talking to you from Cherokee land in Bannerell, North Carolina. Access needs met, check.
I think that's me. Hi, I'm Sarah Goshman, often go by Gosh or Goshman. My pronouns are they, them. I'm calling in from Long Island, New York, which is the ancestral lands of the Massapequa people, specifically in this area. And there are people doing work in my house. My parents are switching the house over from oil to gas, so there might be a lot of background noise, and I'm presenting today, so I apologize. I'll try and mute as much as humanly possible. Also, I have to leave sharply at 2:30 Eastern, which is 11:30 for the other folks, so I may not be able to stay for the planning meeting. Otherwise, all of my needs are met, and yeah, thank you. Check.
Thank you, Sarah. Patricia Miller from the Ramaytush area of the Ohlone people in San Francisco. Access needs are met. Ongoing challenge is the burnout that people are experiencing. Not producers. I'm intersecting with a lot of producers, fellow producers, and a lot of projects coming up, but I know that it's summertime, and I really do believe, doesn't matter what your temperature looks like, people think this is the time I'm not gonna focus on the linear situation. And I think that's the biggest challenge, and I'm certainly preparing to put any work back that I have back towards, believe it or not, closer to the school year, which has nothing to do with college. So the seasonal, I think the seasonal's up for me at the moment. Check. Don't know who's next, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Kitty. And Kitty Drexel, pronouns are she, her, and occasionally we. Land acknowledgement, I am calling from Massachusetts, home of the Nipmuc, Wampanoag, and Massachusetts people. Practice, I am a critic as well as a performer. I'm affiliated with the New England Theater Geek, which is a lovely blog with some wonderful writers who I manage. My access needs are met, aside from a cat nipping at my ankles and just preventing my access to free ankles. And challenges, some of my geeks are not writing and can't write at the moment because of the overwhelming situation with coronavirus, and attempting to care for them as I can as their editor and friend, as well as hiring more people of color, specifically Black people, to my staff. Check.
Hi, I'm Robin, and I am on Miwok, coastal Miwok and Ohlone lands in Bay Area. My access needs are being met. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And thank you so much, Kholoud, for relisting all this stuff. I do look at those notes. I work at the Mountain Play Association, and I've said before, right now we really are in just like super reflection mode on all the things. Mountain Play takes place out in the outside on Mount Tamalpais, which is here in Marin, and basically climate change is a problem. And then on top of that, with Black Lives Matters, it's really rocked for a good thing here in Marin County, and then also with our organization. So we're doing a lot of reflection with those two things. My challenge for this month is going to try and get basically environmental justice. July is plastic free month, and we're going to try and draw some attention to that through education videos that we do on social media. And I'm going to try and figure out a way to combine basically Black Lives Matter movement with environmental movement by doing stuff about environmental justice. So that's my challenge. And check.
Hello, friends. My name is Alick Miller, she, her, hers. I work with Teatro Luna West, which is a all Latino, all women of theater company ensemble. And I also work with the Latinx Theater Commons. I am calling in from the land of the Chumash and the Tonga, and my needs are being met. Thank you. One of my challenges, we're continuing to have quite a few programs this month that are being made available for free. And we are figuring out what is our transition process from like all of the free programming and engagement we've done over the last few months to slowly changing that back into an earned revenue model, but still maintaining accessibility as much as possible. So that's just a challenge we're really doing a lot of thinking and working around. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear from everybody else.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, my name is Kholoud Sawaf, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm speaking to you from Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is the land of the Osage, the Caddo, and the Quapaw. I am part of the Calling Up Justice producing team. I'm a theater director and creator, and my access needs are met. A challenge this week, I was sharing with a small group at the beginning of this call that I'm working on the Curbside Theater Project, which is we're doing a live performance in front of people's homes here. So it's interesting that I've never, as a director, created the section that's called like actors are too close to each other. And I'm like throwing everything about staging and stage beauty out of the window. I'm like, okay, my COVID brain is freaking out. How do I separate actors more? And we're incorporated part of the staging. Part of the characters is a clown who's using a broom to clean, but also for social distancing when we're too close. So that became part of the world, and it's just such an interesting moment. Check, thank you. And I believe Tanya is next.
Yes, shukran, Kholoud. Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you today. My name is Tanya. My pronouns are they and them. I'll change it in the video in a moment. Calling in from the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Petun, and most recently the Mississauga of the New Credit, colonially known as Toronto, Canada. And I only, I guess in terms of access needs within capitalism, I only have a bit of my lunch break left. But I did want to pop in today as I am back to work. Things are very different here in Canada, and my hearts are with all of my American colleagues. So I'm less and less of a poet these days and more of a nonprofit staff. But I really appreciate the team, and particularly Claudia, so-called opening their living room at the very beginning of the pandemic. It's been a great source of learning, support, and community. So I'll be here less and less, but don't forget about me. Feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to still support projects as I'm able to, and look forward to hearing kind of how things continue to emerge for all of you. So check, I think Danny is next.
Hi, I am Danny. I go by she, her, hers. I'm on the Alone land here in the Bay Area in Oakland. What else? Oh, I'm part of the Calling Up Justice producing team and all of the many, many projects that Claudia does always. My access needs are met, kind of. I'm drinking a lot of caffeine. My headphones really hate my computer this morning. I've already crashed Zoom 3 times on my computer. So yeah, before Claudia even noticed, Claudia was like getting coffee and I was like, Zoom crash. Bye, Kholoud. Like, it was really great. So that might happen, just so everyone's aware. And challenge discovery. I worked on the We Charge Genocide July 4th event, which was really amazing. Hopefully we'll get a chance to either discuss that today or next week. We have a few people hopefully that are going to present today, so that'll be really fun. And it was really great, and that's it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Have we all said hello to each other? Well done, colleagues. We are met. Excellent. I would like to invite us to immediately jump into our share while we have our colleagues here. And then I will do a review of awesome topics people have shared for other conversations we might have. But let's first begin with a process share from Sarah and Sabrina Hamilton and Tanya while you are here.
Great. So what we're going to talk about today is the Juneteenth event that we did as part of the Co-Festival of Performance, our first online offering. And I want to give you a little background on the project. It came about because Trump, as you know, announced that he was going to do his first comeback rally on Juneteenth in Tulsa. And even though we are located in Western Massachusetts, Co has a little Oklahoma posse. We did a show last year by Katie Pearl about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and also really about what she did not learn growing up in Tulsa about Oklahoman history as a white girl in Tulsa. I had wanted to do side-by-side programming with a piece by Deletta Gillespie, with a piece that she wrote that's huge called The Magic City Massacre, but there was no production of it available, and it was also really gigantic. So when this happened, I texted the Oklahoma posse and said, "Is this for real?" And I was assured that it was, and then I texted Deletta and said, "Shall we do something? Shall we do something with Magic City Massacre?" And thus the whirlwind began, and we had just over a week to put it together. And the first thing that I did was reach out to Sarah, who you will be hearing more from, and said, "Will you come be technical manager?" Thank God she said yes. They said yes. So what the show is that it's situated in a fictional museum of conveniently forgotten history. And it tells the story of Tulsa, the Black Wall Street, but also how the history got disappeared as well. You are taken through this museum by a narrator figure who is Justice, who's also the divine figure, who is the guide through the event. At Co, we always do post-show discussions as a form of civic dialogue. We usually do a theme season. And so this was no exception and really influenced our choice of platform. And one of the key things for the event was that Daryl Davis, who is an extraordinary man. He's African-American who's done all this work convincing members of the Klan to renounce the Klan and leave the organization. So he was part of our post-show lineup. So the people involved were Deletta, the playwright and director, Sarah, a bunch of the Oklahoma vets came and supported the project either technically or by being in the cast or working dramaturgically or running our online box office. And then Tanya also volunteered from this group, and originally was the chat manager to make sure that, having warned by this group about Zoom bombing, was to make sure that everybody behaved in the chat, and then became so much more. A little bit about platform selection. We decided to go with one version of Zoom, either meeting or webinar, because being in the 5 college area, our festival usually takes place in the summer when most of the students are gone. So our audience skews older, and a lot of them were more familiar with Zoom platforms than other things. We really, really, really wanted to be able to sell tickets because we were committed to paying artists. And we wanted to evoke and have people who were fans of the co-festival remember what it was like to be together in person. So we wanted to have whatever rituals we could that would sort of make people miss that, which included having a lobby where we had sort of a little lobby announcement with a content warning and just basic logo, basic information. And then we let everybody into the theater together at the same time. I did my usual sort of season opening welcome. And then we wanted to have the typical co-post show discussion with attendees being able to participate. And also wanted to make sure that we didn't have too much in the way of Zoom bombing. So that's why we really decided to go with the Zoom webinar as opposed to the Zoom meeting, because it gave us the capacity to do those things. We spent the first couple of days cutting and editing the script. It was originally a 2.5-hour piece with lots of live music and all kinds of things that don't work on Zoom. I originally thought it was going to be a 5-person reading. It ended up being a cast of 14. And you'll hear more about the range of that from people who are really, there's a visual of some of us, not all, but people who were digital natives to people who were using the iPad they got for their retirement for the first time as a retirement gift. So that was quite a trip. And so while the script was being edited, we went through, Sarah and Gillette and myself, and we did camera blocking while Sarah determined the best platform and settings. Over to you, Sarah.
I have somehow managed to stop my video. Hello, I'm back. Great. So we use Zoom webinar. I'm going to go through some of the technical stuff very quickly, but feel free to pop questions in the chat or just talk if you have questions.
And this is Claudia doing a quick interruption.
Yes.
Feel free to not go quickly. It's actually really, we're your audience and we're the nerds that are super interested in how this device talks to this device. That we're here for it. So okay. Go deep. We're here for it.
Okay, cool. One of the things I was actually a little hesitant about presenting because I saw Alvin and Ian talk a few weeks ago, and we did something much less complex. We had one Zoom room and everyone was in it, and that was it. There was no multiple platforms connected. But I think, with the 8-day lead up, because I was a technical supervisor, I haven't put one of these together before. For a wide variety of reasons that also Sabrina mentioned about having folks in the space with us, being able to do the Q&A. We just use webinar, just by itself pretty much, but I'll go through what we did with it in terms of settings wise and stuff, and then some of the challenges we found with it as well. Let's see. So we didn't have, sorry, I'm trying to look at my notes on my phone and they're not well readable on my phone.
Let me know if you need me to feed you.
Yeah, well, okay. I'll talk about, I'm just gonna do this later. Sorry. So the only other thing we used in addition to Zoom was QLab. And so we did our screen sharing. I had a couple of slideshows that I built out in QLab. And so we did screen sharing directly through Zoom. We didn't use OBS or anything like that in the middle. I'm going to show you a little piece of that. And we also did that for sound cues. So Zoom has an option where you can just share audio only, and it doesn't change the screen. So you can have, your actors on screen and share your QLab sound basically. So we did some of that, but I'll show you a little bit where we did where we did a slideshow just real quick. I'll show you. Also, we shuffled around where we were going to talk about this, but actually I'm going to talk about this first. One of the first things that was sort of what Sabrina mentioned is that the actors all had different devices and different setups and different knowledge levels and a kind of a one. So with only 2 days of rehearsal with them, one of the things that we were really focused in on was like just helping get them to the best possible place we could with what they had, essentially. And so one of the things we did in order to make that work was tech checks with each actor. So I got together and we only, because of time constraints, only I was able to be with them. I know Sabrina wanted to be there. And we checked for each person. We talked about what devices they were using. We tried to encourage folks to, like, if they had a laptop, to use that instead of a phone or a tablet, because of how the Zoom controls appear on the screen, and also just the stability of being able to press the buttons. People with phones often had a really hard time turning cameras on and off. Microphones, so some folks were using headphones and those have mics in them and they were terrible, so teaching people how to switch their audio input to their computer or device mic. We had one person and an external mic, but most people did not. Getting folks to position their lighting appropriately, so trying to get them lit primarily from the front. We didn't have a lot of
Yeah, this is something that
like color temperature options. Go ahead, Serena. Yeah.
That Deletta and I wish that we had been able to be a part of, because the final thing really had some people at very different angles and with a lamp behind them instead of. It would have been one of the things that had we had another day, or if we could all have been on the technical fittings together, we could have, I think, combined and shortened the process by doing costume, because the actors were finding their own costumes, and some of them had many, many costumes and did an extraordinary job. And then we had to make sure that they were separated from their background. So people who were wearing white shirts, particularly men in white shirts, they had to not be against a back wall, or they had to be lit properly, or we had to add a vest, all those kinds of things. So being able to do sort of technical fittings one-on-one, I think is really advantageous. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, and of course our actors were also working, so we were working with our limitations and their time limitations as well. So I was just doing the fittings after rehearsals in the middle of the day, pretty much any time that someone said they were available. We'd do their tech checks, but yeah, it was hard to get folks to like any kind of roles or what we're working with. Also, so the reason I kind of went into this is mostly we didn't use any virtual backgrounds. We decided we didn't like the way that it, you got the like kind of digitally bits around the edges and just aesthetically, but we did for the main character of Justice, who's sort of the narrator through this piece. And so the little clip I'm going to play is Justice talking and then just going right into a slideshow. So just give me a second to share my screen.
Justice being a goddess, we figured could look differently. And had a sort of Justice figure with scales as their digital background.
But as you can see here, there were some challenges with her hair because she's in front of like a black curtain that's in front of a window. So earlier in the night when there was sun, we could see it pretty well because the backlight helped pop her out from the background. And then as the sun went down, which was another thing we had to think about during the performance, the Zoom just had more and more trouble sort of differentiating her hair from her background, which was unfortunate, but artistically we liked this background better than having her couch in the background. And so this is what we went with. I'm just going to show like 30 seconds of this.
Burning internment camps, different times, different places. History seems to be repeating itself so often, and why? Well, at least one belief has been dispelled. Looting is not racially exclusive. We are now here in Exhibit 6.
I should probably put a content warning on this, that there's
Greenwood,
images of people's homes burning and violence and destruction.
was still smoldering as one over 1,000 Black homes and businesses were nothing more than burnt brick and ash. Its former residents had either skipped town or were in hiding, dead or held hostage in 3 internment camps.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. I apologize for not thinking that through ahead of time, but anyway, you can see. So this is all being run out of QLab on my laptop. And on my end, I had a laptop with an external screen share. I keep stopping with my video instead of stopping the screen share. Good job. I didn't do that during the show, at least. Had running the controls of QLab on my laptop, had an external monitor, so I was sharing the second screen, which is where the videos were displaying, and then I had another laptop set up, logged in as an audience member, so I could make sure that what they were seeing was actually what I wanted them to see, which I'll talk about in a minute as well in terms of limitations of Zoom. And then I had an iPad with my script on it, which had all my cues and markings in it. The other thing we had to do technically was adjust input volumes. So in Zoom, you have audio settings and everyone's input volumes were very different. And so you can turn off the automatic input volumes. Probably many of you know this. And we had basically, I just had everyone talk and listened and turned on my little decibel meter on my phone to make sure that everyone was at a similar level so that actors then could play with their dynamics and know that, you know, we were able to hear them and all that kind of stuff. And Zoom wasn't going to try and bump them up if they were doing a quiet moment or vice versa. You know, we could have a little more room there. We did a recording, as you can see, but Zoom does, okay, backtracking. Zoom has multiple modes that you can share in. So there's like gallery view, which you can play with this in Zoom meeting. You can see the two views. If you put it on speaker view, whoever's talking will show on your screen just by themselves. If you put it on gallery view, everyone will show up. You can change it so that only people who have their camera on will show up, which we did, so that when people had their camera off, we didn't see their little black boxes with their names on it. So that was really important. And then in Zoom webinar, you have an option called follow host view. And what that does is whoever's the host, which in this case was me, I can switch between speaker and gallery, and it means that the audience will see whichever one I'm seeing. So I can switch the whole audience. The challenge with that is that the presenters, which is what the cast were, they were presenters, they get to choose their own view. They can't see what I'm picking. And so they didn't really have any read on like what the output was to the audience. So we had to just really intricately write in their camera on off cues, and they just had to trust like in the script. And instead of trying to know which view we were going to be in at any given moment, because that was kind of complicated to, I think, to be able to like wrap your head around that and know if you could be on or off depending on which view. So they just followed the camera blocking, and I just followed my script for changing the views back and forth. And that worked fairly well. The recording, so Zoom cannot record the follow host view thing. It will give you a whole recording of the show in speaker view and a whole recording of the show in gallery view. And then and a third recording with your screen shares and a fourth audio file with just the audio if you want that. And then you can like piece the whole thing together. So what I was showing you on my other screen is that I just grabbed Camtasia, which is like a screen capture software, and just did a screen recording. So it's got, you can probably, I see Sabrina have your hand up, give me 2 seconds and then I will, you can see in the screen that like it's got the little recording thing at the top in the corner, and it's got the chat down here at the bottom of the chat, and it would like pop up when someone sent a message, and there's just the leave button. There's some things about it so that, you know, you get all the like Zoom features, which is not ideal, but it's just how the only way I was able to grab the whole screen. So we're trying to figure out what to do.
I think that can be useful for audience members who had to miss the event, or for a wider audience. We're now talking with the artists, the cast, to see, because there is another production plan of the show. We're seeing if they would like us to take this video forward, and that would be an opportunity for us potentially to caption it. And we would probably want to edit between the different views so to have it optimal. And there were a couple places where people dropped out. We could maybe take footage from the rehearsal if need be. So there's some things that we could do post-production to do sort of an optimal documentation version of it.
Yeah. The other thing I had here to talk about was communication. We use the in-Zoom chat that's sort of similar to what we use here, where you can message everyone or individual people. You can't message individual audience members, but you can message like all panelists. So I was able to just talk to the actors without the audience seeing that. It all ends up in the same chat stream. So thankfully our audience was fairly quiet during the production so that our messages to each other were easily visible. But we didn't set up another thing, partially because of time and partially because the actors were using, a lot of them are using like their phone or their iPad or their primary device, and so they didn't necessarily have another way to like have the chat open and the script open and the Zoom open at the same time. We were struggling a little with that. Michaela, maybe Sabrina can speak to that. I don't know if we've decided yet how we are sharing it. Sabrina, there's a question.
We're first trying to get, we need to get buy-in from the cast and the director and playwright, and that has not yet been determined. I'd love to get them some more money, but they need to retain control of the piece. So TBA, but if so, believe me, this group will find out.
I'm going to really quickly talk about the crew, and then I will pass it back to Sabrina for a couple last pieces of information. We didn't have, so Tanya was originally supposed to moderate the chat and ended up doing a lot more, as Sabrina pointed out. And one of the things that they ended up doing that was super important was feeding me information about who had background noise going on and wasn't muted of the actors, and who was having like camera issues. Because I was doing too many things between the QLab and the screen switching and just sort of managing all the tech from one place. So thank goodness that they had that experience and were able to tell me, because some of the actors were struggling with like muting when they needed to, things like that. So Tanya was like feeding me info about where feedback was coming from, and so I could go ahead and mute that person or send them a message or whatever. So they were super helpful there.
We had someone outside in a huge rainstorm,
yes.
Which just did wonders to the sound. And he was the one who was least familiar with the technology of turning mics and cameras on and off. So that was particularly, and on an iPad, which was harder too. And outdoors, that was a challenge.
That was a challenge. And he was new to the iPad as well. He was the one who got it as a retirement present. So he definitely, it was helpful for Tanya to just have someone else who could help manage that while I was running cues and things. It would probably in the future would love to have someone like actually focusing just on the cameras and mics, and then someone else on QLab, and maybe, and then a stage manager who has the capacity to call things and think through challenges and talk to people, rather than just hitting all the buttons and not having time to kind of zoom out and have that high view of what's going on during the show. And the other thing we had, Sabrina mentioned, one person had a rainstorm, and so this was really important, is that we had some understudies. We had Deletta was understudying basically any of the female parts, and we had someone doing all the male parts as well, and he actually had to come in several times. He didn't turn his camera on, he just read the lines if he saw that someone either hadn't unmuted themselves or had gotten kicked out, or whatever, they were not on screen when they needed to be and they weren't coming in with their line. He would just read out the line to keep it flowing, and that was huge. Really saved us a couple of times. So yeah, and I'm going to pass it back to Sabrina for a couple last things. I think we're at about 20 minutes so far, just as a time check for us.
We're okay? Okay. So somebody had mentioned earlier about not wanting to just offer all the content for free, and we were really determined to pay artists, and we didn't have a lot of outside support for that, so we needed to generate income through the box office. And one of the things that we've done with is we have our own box office that is built as a WooCommerce site. So all we have to pay is PayPal's not-for-profit rate. We're not paying brown paper tickets or any other service, and all the information stays in-house. What we did in order to try to do the ratios of paying artists and of making it accessible is that we did a drop-down menu with payment options. We had a patron price, we had a standard price, which was $19 for the 19th. We had a discounted price suggested for those with SNAP EBT cards on unemployment or with income affected by COVID. And then we had an option which was choose your own price or add on an additional donation here. And that was a variable amount. So people could pay as little as $1. And we had a couple people who paid $100 to attend, which was really lovely. Including someone we've never heard of before, brand new to the festival, not on any of our lists. So that was kind of exciting too. So when people bought a ticket, an email was automatically generated, and the information that said that 2 hours ahead of time before the event, they would be sent an email with the link to get into the webinar. And that worked fairly well, except for one huge drawback, which is that Co's email is having problems getting through to people. It's going to a lot of people's spam filters right now. I'm in the middle of a whole process of trying to whitelist our email stuff, which is kind of a nightmare. So what we had was that both Tanya and Carrie Cole, who was our box office manager, could look right into the Gmail box office account and see emails being generated and coming in and notifying of ticket sales. And then Carrie sent emails from her own personal email address with CoFest in the subject heading to give people the link. And that way we avoided it going into people's spam filters for the most part. We also put up on Co's social media and on the website, if you're having problems, email here. And then the team was responding in real time to those things. Tanya, do you want to share anything about that process?
Sure. It was great to be able to support people on the back end who had, I didn't know this, that with a certain version of Microsoft S, is it called? You basically can't download Zoom. So of course I directed people to use Zoom on the web app. And even that seemed to be an issue for some people. So there was overall a really wide variety of experience, both on the acting side and on the audience side. So you know, with the alarm bells going off in the chat, like, I can't hear the sound. That's always something to pay close attention to. But in certain cases, it was people needed to turn up their volume. And same with working with making sure that people were able to either download the app, like they couldn't find it on their iPhone. If they weren't able to use it on their computer, I suggested, do you have another device? They were, like, for example, in the App Store, Googling the wrong or searching the wrong thing. So instead of Zoom, you know, they were getting a dating app instead of a meeting app. So it was great to be able to support a wide variety of people with that kind of level of experience to troubleshoot back and forth. A couple of people gave up and a couple of people got in. People were mindful of being a good audience member in terms of not wanting to show up late. So we were answering a lot of questions like that on the back end. But I mostly wanted to just applaud the Co-Festival team for bringing together a great production, like a really high-level production for a short period of time. I know a few of you may want to speak to the experience as an audience member. I think maybe Joan, Mickey, and Patricia were in the audience. But from someone who was who was a little bit more responsive, I think I had a bit of a broader view and was able to have a conversation with Sarah at the beginning to answer some of their initial questions around setting up the tech, to being at the end where I'm learning still things from Sarah, which is great. And the webinar worked well. We were able to, like, move people who were not on the Q&A into the audience. And then we had a little bit of an internal misunderstanding. We actually were able to also migrate people back. So some people actually left the Zoom and then came back to be for the post-show kind of hangout. So it worked well to work around some of the differences between the webinar mode and the meeting mode on Zoom in that sense. And overall, I think the backup actors were really essential, and that strategy had been, like, well thought out and well rehearsed. So it really was seamless. When I was watching monitor levels and I made a mistake of muting someone without having the script. So this is something we saw at the Bay Area Theater Festival, that there's questions around devices and experience, but then there's also about access and transparency. So I could hear the noise and the interruption, but I didn't know when the person was on. And so it actually was a double issue, because it was taking away from the other actors, even though he was supposed to be on. This was the rain incident. But when you mute someone, then they can't unmute themselves. So it's a little bit complicated on the back end to be able to then take over the managing of the muting and unmuting. So yeah, information transparency. You know, on one hand, I could have been able to look at a script, but it's really actually the time that Sarah and the actors put in that only made it possible to bring something from like initial conceptualization on a technical platform to delivery to an audience that's like, wow, it has a feeling of a live theater. You know, what a great show. Now let's talk about it. And Daryl Davis was great. It was really great to hear him speak with Daletta Gillespie. And to me, the Q&A also added a more transparent live feel to it. So in my mind, we could, not very many people were interested in this conversation about how the show went on, but they were interested about the content. So the show is so well delivered that it almost could have been recorded, pre-recorded, but it was live. You know, because it went through seamlessly. But then I think the Q&A, just to highlight, you know, how the production, from my point of view, came through, did kind of integrate that feeling of really being in a live space, an online digital live theater space. So yeah, it was really great to see how all those things kind of came together. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you for helping so much. Just to be clear, one of the things that we did was that the cast, so they could join the post show, because they were on the other side of the divide, we had them leave as presenters and come in as audience members so that they could be part of the post show. And then we switched them back over at the end so that we could have the cast party, the thing that we just missed. It was like so hard to not be able to be together with everybody when the event was over. So it ended up being sort of a bunch of us gathering together online in the little boxes, but then there were calls going back and forth and texts going back and forth for probably 3 or 4 hours after the show from the participants. But I'm curious about those of you who attended, how it read for you.
I really appreciated this performance. There's no way I would have known about it without this group. And I really appreciated actually how it was sort of rough. And it was rough. And I liked that a lot. And I felt much more engaged than other projects where I've seen much higher budgets and lots of folks that have been able to buy the bells, the whistles, the apps, and fly the videographer in for Brooklyn. I really appreciated this. It really felt like it came from the heart of a community. And yeah, there was a wide variation of experience, but it brought the history forward because of that. There was no smoothness. You couldn't turn away from it because it was engaging. And I really appreciated it. And it was exciting to see, I know, so I saw Tanya was like, oh, in the back room. I think was Danny there too. There was somebody else from this group that was supporting in the back. And I enjoyed that too. I felt a little bit like, ooh, I know who's there. So thank you so much for doing it. And I hope you have a due chance to share it. I know the legal rights is always an issue, but I mean, it's a great resource. So thank you, the whole team.
Sabrina, you're muted, and Kitty has a hand up as well. Sabrina, you're muted.
Sabrina, we cannot hear you, but I'm going to invite Kitty, who had their hand up. Go right ahead. I'm not calling on folks. Just unmute yourself and talk. And Sabrina, you're up next. Got to unmute yourself though. We all have agency.
I did catch it, and what I loved about the performance was it brought the storytelling to the forefront. It was like homegrown theater. It was homegrown theater, and it brought the storytelling aspects to the forefront. And I really appreciated hearing all of these interesting voices that did not shirk away from the truth, the harsh, awful truth. It was wonderful. It was in some ways cathartic.
Thanks. Our cast was in California, Oklahoma, Baltimore, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, at a couple of other places, I think, as well. So that was an interesting thing. It was a kind of community that I've never experienced this way before, of feeling national and together at the same time. I'm so used to being in the room together, and that's what makes the community. And so one of the liberating things about this is that we could have people in the cast who were really connected to the material. Some of them were deeply connected to Daletta and her journey with this piece, which was first written. She was a grad student of mine, like, I don't know, 15 years ago. So that's a new experience that I think could only have happened with this. It's one of the upsides.
Just really quick, I dropped 2 links in the chat, in the notes. One is the article that I wrote, which goes over all of the things that I talked about and more in some detail. Also, I dropped an article in that was really helpful to me, which was written by Katie Pearl's directing students at Wesleyan. It's called An Ontology of Zoom, and it's about directing on Zoom. If you haven't read it, I just love it so much. I like read it like many days just because it's comforting in so many ways to like hear artists talking about making art in this time, and I really enjoy it. So I put that in there as well. I think that's all I have, unless I answered some questions in the chat, unless anyone has anything else.
I have so many notes, and Sabrina, you are still muted.
Just saying, Sarah's article is indeed, there's a link to it, and it contains a lot of the stuff that we've talked about here.
And it was a very collaborative effort. It is not really just mine. Sabrina helped a lot. I think Tanya.
And Tanya too.
Yeah, Tanya also gave some notes. Yeah.
Just gigantic shout out to all of us. And you just named the thing that Katie Pearl's students did. What we're doing right now is we're doing a lab of the world. And it's very useful when people do the additional labor, when they have the capacity to, doing the additional labor of codifying and essentializing their learning so that they can be shared with others. To a certain extent, that's what we're doing by recording these sessions and making them available publicly. But the article is a way to essentialize that knowledge. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I highly recommend people check out today's notes because there's a lot of great links in there. So I wanted to just lift up a couple of things people had spoken into the space, and also make sure that we had room for questions and answers. I text message and pivot throughout our entire conversations. So we're going to have today's session talk about this production because we're inside of it, and I'd like to be able to have the full conversation. So let's take our time. So let's see. Lighting. I believe that Co-Festival is run by a lighting expert. And lighting is a big deal with all of these, with the green screens and all of that. Were there any observations or more discrete learnings that you had around lighting?
Funny you should ask that. I was just on a Zoom call with the lighting design working group of OISTAT, which is the International Theater Designers organization. And one of the things we were talking about doing, or that I suggested we do as a session, is I was sitting there looking at the Zoom call and saying how many lighting designers were so badly lit in their own Zoom meeting. It was just appalling. It was appalling. We are so much better lit than they were. I can't even begin to tell you. And so what I suggested we do, and what I think they're actually interested in doing, is trying to put together a guide to lighting yourself for Zoom. Which I think would be very useful, especially as part of their goal, as many of them are educators, are to teach people to appreciate and think about lighting who are not just going to be lighting designers, but to sort of raise awareness of that for directors, performers, the entire field. So hopefully that can happen. And yes, I do have some ideas. For instance, I have a desk lamp that is on a dimmer. I have another one here. I have the light of my screen adjusted because that's my cool light. My incandescent is my warms, and I'm also facing north. So that is a really good cool light in the center with a little bit warmer here. And one of the things that I was doing for the Magic City Massacre presentation was making sure the time of day of how bright I needed to make my screen compared to the light that was coming in the window, because they were the cooler light sources. And then making sure that my background is dimmer than my head, and I'm wearing a contrasting color to the background, but also not speaking against just a void. Usually I would have my camera angle higher, less double chin for one, but that also can help with the framing too. You can see the difference between when I have the light things in the background, when I don't. See how I take a different amount of focus? So those kinds of things.
The part I had a major struggle with the lighting in Times of Day with Playground. The very first one we did was terrible, but we rehearsed earlier in the day, like 5 o'clock, and there was still, you know, quite a bit of sunlight. It was back in shoots May-ish, but we had the performance later on that night, and even with the green screen, I had the lamp still facing me. And I didn't have a green screen, but I had the virtual background, and anytime I anytime I moved during rehearsal was fine. And then of course during the show when it was darker outside and I just had the lamp, anytime I moved, I'd completely disappeared into the virtual background that was there. So we really struggled with lighting based on when we were rehearsing and then based on when we were practicing. And of course, if you're a lot of people are trying to rehearse with folks from all around the country and they're in different time zones. And then when you actually do the performance, it's really hard to gauge that. I'd love to hear any thoughts on
another
trying to do with the virtual background and everything.
Another issue can be if people have software on their computers that is changing the color temperature. For those of us who have sleep issues, my computer goes warmer as I get towards bedtime, so I have to make sure to turn that off. And there may be, I've heard some other people address lighting issues by looking at the light from the computer itself, and also just not having one angle, but having actually a multitude of angles, and ideally, so you don't look flat, they're not all the same brightness and they're not all the same color temperature.
Two observations. One, I recognize, well, we're talking about two different things with lighting. So you're inside the Zoom. Zoom is using its own proprietary software and algorithms to give us backgrounds. The algorithm it's using for the mobile devices is different than the desktop version. So I'm using a green screen, and there are certain lighting choices I make to make the green screen actually look like it's not super weird. Like I've got a light that's a very specific lighting source, and it's why I'm in this location. And then I've got lighting coming from another location to give a little false depth. So there are some, like this is low key. It's not like I set up lamps or anything. I just chose the nicest location in my room to make the green screen look the most realistic. But I recognize that I need a guide. I Googled and I actually struggled to find any kind of tutorial to help me figure out what does a ring light do to a green screen. But I wanted to say out loud before we do anything else, whatever guides that are created have to center blackness. They have to start with black and brown skin tones. One of the problems with all of our lighting in our entire industry is it's designed to center the palest skin tones, and then we end up having to do all sorts of weird workarounds when we're working with mixed race casts or predominantly brown casts, and I would like to interrupt that pattern. So I'm hoping whoever is watching this, or whoever you are talking to, Sabrina, that y'all are coming up with some guides, lighting guides, that are including my skin tone. All right.
I've actually done panels on this at USITT, and some other people have done this over the past. Yeah, they've been really great. And also there have been some things about some sessions on photographing for the stage, photographing documentation, and how to work with actors of color in that, not just white actors in that, to make sure that stage photographs are effective. Important.
Patricia,
and one other thing is that one of the things that Katie Pearl did with her students was they actually used swatch books and had little things where they played with flipping gel over their camera as another way of adjusting sort of hue and tone.
Yeah, you can get almost any swatch book from almost any lighting realtor for free. It's like this thick. It has like lots and lots of colors, and you can actually like just put it on a light that's shining on you, and you can tell the difference in color because like I'm Asian and you can't put me under a green yellow tone because I look like I'm going to vomit on you. And so like you won't know that until you actually like, try it out. So I highly recommend. They're all about, yeah, like just pink is great for those who are older because of rose colored glass. Like you will learn many, many things. I highly recommend just getting a swatch book and playing with it.
Danny, you want to put a link, or Sabrina put a link in there for where we might order some things. And Patricia, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say if this is a subject that we want to do any focus on, I was in a 3-hour session with Adam Elder, who was specifically doing lighting hacks for Zoom performances. And I would not want to reproduce what he did. He gave us a little short shopping list. He definitely had fantastic Venn diagrams, and which Sabrina, of course, you were speaking of, key lights and fill lights. And one of the things that was cool was a lot of people had already bought these ring lights. And one of the actresses said, because, you know, ring lights will leave you little donuts in the eyes. So you don't want that, right? And so she has a fabric bag from Daiso that she puts her ring light in to soften and diffuse that. But he was an incredibly generous person. I even mentioned this group to him while he was on that call. So again, we have a lot of folks to invite into this group, but if this is a subject that folks are interested in, I would love to recommend him. Check.
Any more reflections, conversations on lighting in this moment? Questions around, I actually had a quick question, Sarah. What was the software you used to capture your screen? Is that what you said your method was? You captured the full screen?
Yeah, I did. I use Camtasia. I have a friend who works for that company. I can share that license if anyone needs it. Speaking of our little tech collective, I think it'll work on multiple machines, which is, yeah, I had downloaded another free screen capture software, which I can look up the name of. And then my friend was like, let me give you a license for this one that I know works. And I was like, yes, please. That sounds great. So, and you can export it from there to any format, and you can edit it right in Camtasia too, which is really nice. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it would be fun to play with it at the very least. I'm going to name this as a thing that I keep learning. The free version was designed to be broken. I keep learning that I'm trying to find these low-cost free solutions, and they're actually dark path manipulative design tricks to force me into spending more money than I originally wanted to spend.
Yeah.
So instead of finding the actual mid-price logical price point, I end up trying something free, having a failure experience, and then thinking, oh, they're the only option I have. I must buy their enterprise model. So please keep bringing other options to the table. Let's break monopolies, especially with these tech solutions that we're manifesting for ourselves.
Yeah, I'll put in both of the ones that I played with, just for the one I used and the other one I tried. I'll put in the notes.
I'm wondering if we can spend a little bit of time talking about the complex communications matrices that we have to put together to run backstage when none of you are in the same physical space, and what are some of the solutions people have tried with the different productions that they've done. I would be very curious, because what exactly did you do, Sarah, with Tanya? Were you text messaging, or how were you communicating?
We were just in the Zoom chat, which is like not really what I would recommend. Like it worked for us, but we were just sending private messages in the Zoom chat. Yeah. I also had my phone available because Sabrina and I had talked about texting, so I wasn't using my phone for a script or a screen.
But I was using text with Tanya and box office. So the box office stuff was using more text and email. And then the Zoom chat was left for the show. But poor Tanya was in all worlds.
And because I was running all the queues, like I didn't have to set up a comm system to call anything. And so I think, but in the future, I think I would rather figure out how to do that than have to run everything myself. I think it would have been better. I've heard of people either having another like conference call where you call in, or I know we talked about Discord chats as a back of house, although I like voice. I mean, I guess you could use Discord for voice too.
I just did, we could have used Discord for voice. I think that's actually going to be our next level up, Danny. So this was my experience with our backstage. And so we experienced several points of design failure, but they, like I said, the production itself was highly successful and beautiful. So our learnings are just about leveling up the next experience. But what we discovered was Claudia Alick was actually serving as an artistic director. Like I was like the person to be like, that face should be on the screen. This face should be on the screen. But the TD was doing so many things that the TD could not be looking at the Discord to be triggered. Now, if it was by voice, the TD would hear it and then that would trigger it. So I'm going, oh, voice is good. We were very lucky. And our technical director, who was serving who was doing what you were doing, Sarah, doing all of this stuff, was in the same space as somebody that we had who was our stage manager. But we found out that, and I'm unsure if Zoom has changed its settings, and I need to go back in and figure some stuff out, or if it's always been like this and I'm only discovering that I find it annoying. But the co-host being unable to manage breakout room spaces, the co-host, we just discovered there were limited permissions for the co-hosts in ways that made us it made our team, it made it hard to manage, to collectively manage the space, because the host had way more permissions than the co-hosts.
Yeah, one of the things that webinar doesn't have the breakout rooms, and I wish we did, but so we didn't maybe hit those limitations with the co-hosts, like they were able to manage people's audio and video, which is primarily what we needed them to be able to do. But yeah, and Zoom documentation is very poor about this stuff, which is part of why I wanted to write that article, because you can't get a good answer from them about what the limitations are on those things.
And certainly not in a timely manner. I'm getting all these emails now saying, can we help? It's like,
well, and you saw like Ian's setup was kind of gorgeous. So Ian could see, this was the Dancing Earth production. Ian could see everyone in their Zoom, but because Ian was taking everyone from the Zoom, everyone had 2 calls in their spaces. They had a Skype call and a Zoom call. Zoom was backstage, so they could always, in between numbers, be like, hey, Ian, blah, 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 and Ian could actually potentially video chat with any of the performers while the production was going on. So it was a full Zoom backstage, and Skype was actually the performance space. I keep getting distracted by the chat. Please, whoever was going to speak.
How much internet do you need for something like that, though? I mean, it seems like we upped our internet. We of course still live in a black hole, so it's not really changing much of anything. But it seems like you would need probably internet not only for the main person, but also for the other people that have. I mean, even the actors at some point, right? Because you'd need to have both Zoom and Skype.
All I know is that I have participated in multiple Zooms simultaneously with my regular internet. And so I think it's possible.
So during the live performance, are you using that second platform just for chat? Or are you visual on both, I guess is my question.
Well, for We Charge Genocide, we were using Discord and chat only on Discord. The other thing we discovered on Discord is that if you don't do the piece of homework to tell every single participant, make sure you've turned off the notifications bing throughout your entire show, you're going to hear a boop, 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 boop. That's a thing.
that was part of our pre-show check that we did with everybody.
Yes.
Specifically, if you're the video screen share, like Nancy, who was our video screen share, like that was his position. Constantly during his screen sharing, I could hear the Discord ringing, and I was like, that's Claudia and I talking to each other. I know that because it's us. So yeah.
The other thing is making sure that you don't distract the cast, because especially if they don't have everything memorized and they're reading from a script already, you know, just sort of real estate on different devices was an issue for people. You know, that's where if people have an investment to make in a second monitor, it's really, really, really useful. But yeah, there's something about making sure that we enable the performers to do what they need to do in the way that they do it best.
Just going to voice out loud the thing Patricia put into the chat, which was make sure you have an Ethernet cord, because that is the truth. Hardwire is always going to get you better than Wi-Fi. That is the realness.
And if you've got a Mac, make sure you got the little dongle that you got to put in. Some of the, like Air Macs or whatever, they don't have a Ethernet hole. So you have to get the dongle that gives you the Ethernet connection, which is a pain in the butt. Because I lost mine.
Any other reflections, conversations about what is the backstage communication channels, or how do you empower your director to actually, or your stage manager to call cues for a show successfully in a remote design? These topics are all going to come up again. So if you have more, we can always bring it back. Or if you want to interrupt whatever we move on to, we can. These are just the notes I took based on this sharing. Please also interrupt if you have specific, discrete questions for any of our participants. I'm going to repeat something Tanya wrote in the chat, and it's also in the notes. We talked about the beauty of having redundancy in your cast. So of course we understand what an understudy model is. You know, if your performer maybe gets the flu or hurts an ankle, you want to have another actor, if you're capable, have another actor who's already rehearsed and knows the role so they can swap into the production. But in a remote or at a distance digital producing practice, that moment of your actor becoming unavailable can happen in the middle of the show in seconds because of the internet. So having multiple actors, oh, heck yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For We Charge Genocide TV, our redundancy was video. So we'd always have a video of the performer in case the performer is unable to, either due to connectivity being interrupted or because we're doing a racial justice project and everybody's simultaneously protesting and stuff. If you can't physically be there, we've got redundancies designed into the formula. But the thing that Tanya said out loud that I wanted to repeat was, who are your tech understudies? How are you setting yourself up for success by having multiple team members? Because what if your stage manager's computer suddenly shuts down? What's your redundancy?
We had actually planned to do that, which is our plan, which we didn't actually do and fortunately didn't need, was to have the guy who was the male voice understudy also have the QLab files on his computer.
I have a question quickly about the webinar, just because I haven't had a chance to purchase it because it is so much more expensive. When you use the chat, like the actors use the chat, does the audience see that chat? They don't see that. Okay. So that really is the backstage chat that you guys can, okay.
They have their own chat. And in part of my pre-show speech, I said that audience members should make a choice. And here's, like, everybody practice, here's the button where you turn it on and off. And you may choose to concentrate more fully on the piece, or you may want to interact. And then we're going to suggest that everybody turn their chat on for the post-show discussion. So we worked it in that way.
All right.
So one of those moments where Sabrina brought up earlier, where she was like, you don't want to distract your actors. I'm just going to bring back something that Peter brought up during his Zoom webinar, is that if you pull the chat out of your Zoom box, you won't get the notifications at the bottom. So that can also like help distract from your actors. Just a quick helpful tip.
What does it feel like audiencing in the webinar? And we've audienced for webinars before. Do we like that as an audiencing experience? That's my question.
Honestly, I'm not a huge fan. It doesn't captivate me from the few times that I've done it through the webinar. I find it pretty easy for me to walk away, but I didn't see Sabrina's production. Yeah.
Hi, it's Mickey. I agree. I've seen so many things on webinar now, and particularly the weekly crypt camp that I attend, which has wonderful speakers, but it's really becoming, it's just, you know, me like listening to a speaker in a box with a ASL interpreter in a box, and then they try and do like questions to kind of make it interactive, but I think at least you got to have some breakout rooms or something at some point, which I think they are doing. And I haven't, by the time I'm done listening to the speakers, I don't have the brain space to go to that. But yeah, it's more isolating, I think.
I appreciate one of the principles that you put, Claudia, into this group, which is please give full attention, or I would call it radical presence, and which is radical for some reason. And I do find, to echo what other folks have said, that it is isolating as a webinar, but if you want to multitask, if you want to, it's that option, but it's not as engaging, but it gives me, it lets me off the hook as an audience. Like there's things that I can do in a webinar that I would never do in a live performance. And actually that's one of the challenges of this week. What is the respectful way to behave on Zoom? I was in a workshop with, Deborah Elizier's holding space. Well, Sphere, I've been doing that for 4 weeks. And someone sent me a photograph of myself acting. And I was like, you would never pull out a camera and take a picture of an improvisation in a studio. It wasn't that I was doing anything naked or exposing, but I was like, you don't understand the intimacy of this thing, and I don't want to be photographed when I'm working. And the same thing as an audience, you have a responsibility to sit up and pay attention and give the energy back to the performers. And webinar takes that responsibility away, and also the work. So I don't know. I just went around in a big circle, but I'm not apologizing for it.
Yeah, never apologize. The entire point of these conversations is to talk about all the things. That's useful. I will say 2 things, though. One is this space is actually not a space that's requesting radical presencing. This space is a space that's doing relaxed presencing. So it's a relaxed meeting style, which means you can be on camera, off camera. You can be as present as works for you, because the entire point of this is, selfishly, I just pulled open a Zoom so I could figure some stuff out, and it was like, if y'all want to come work out some stuff with me every Monday at 10, come and join. So it's relaxed, right? But I am in love with the concept of radical presencing, because there are spaces that I craft and participate in that do request I be fully present, and I make sure anything, and I'm just there. I love that as a concept. This space, however, it's mixed presencing, as you will. The audiencing I love on the YouTube, with the YouTube chats on the side. Yesterday, this was a really delightful experience. So I went to Derek Schwartz Cloud Cafe production. The link, Facebook reminded me I'd said yes to supporting Derek. Thank you, Facebook, for reminding me. So then I clicked the link. It took me to the YouTube, rather than putting me inside a Zoom with the performers or inside a webinar where I would have felt alone. I was in the YouTube, and they had somebody who had the job of working the YouTube chat. So I didn't feel like I was the only one there. And then we could chat and respond to the performance. And then a delightful thing happened where at the end of the show, it auto-clicked to another live show that I actually was a performer that I was friends with. And then I was able to see their performance. So that was magical. But I really like that audiencing. Peter, you mentioned Twitch before. Do you audience? Do you go to Twitch stuff?
Yes, I have. And they use Zoom and stream. They being there's a theater company that I work with sometimes who use Zoom to produce the theater and Twitch to stream it. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
And do you get to chat? Like, that's the one thing I like about Twitch. You can chat on Twitch, and it feels like you're audiencing with other people. Like, you're not seeing their faces, but you can chat with them.
The audiencing on Twitch, I agree, is good. Women's Theater Festival of North Carolina uses Twitch, and that's what the Lady Scribblers was on. And I did drop in the chat that right now, for the whole month of July, they are having both conference events and performances the entire month, like all day long. It is wild, and a lot of it is lighting for Zoom and design for Zoom, and a lot of the things we're talking about. So check them out. They're doing amazing work.
I have only watched one Zoom audience webinar thing, and that was Peter's show. But I have worked many, many of Claudia's events, including this. And I wonder, jumping off of what Patricia said in terms of like energy, I feel like there's a sense of energy that comes from these workshops and like Claudia's events that aren't manifested in the webinar. Like, I personally have my Zoom on gallery view. I can see everyone's faces. I know even if you're not on video, you're still there, and I still feel this like weird ethereal connection to you. So like, I know you're there. I know you're like invested to some extent, whether it is like, I can't be here because I'm lying down, or like, but I'm still like listening. So I wonder if that aspect should be brought into the webinars, where it's like webinar audiences. It's like, hello everybody, you're webinar audiencing. You might not be able to see everybody, but we're all here to see this show, and you can all like start chatting. I feel like that's the experience that's missing, where you are sitting all alone in your house and you're like, I'm gonna cook some food while this is happening. Like, I don't feel anyone else. While like here, even if I was gonna be like, I'm gonna cook some food, I can still feel you guys. Does that make sense? I don't know. I was just like rambling a little.
It does to me. I had really wanted to have a lobby where the audience could see each other before we let them into the webinar.
Right. Has anyone tried that? Because that just seems like such a great idea, and I haven't seen anybody do it.
We would have had, I guess, Sarah, am I right, to switch them over from being present? We couldn't do it.
We actually did an experiment in this room, or in this peer exchange session. I think it was like our third or our fourth gathering. We were like, how can we make a lobbying experience? And we discovered that the waiting room had so many limitations. It didn't allow people to feel like they were in community. So then we had this bright idea that we would create a breakout room. It was called the lobby. And then what you'd do is you'd move your people from your waiting room the lobby, and then you'd move your people from the lobby to and it's a lot of labor, because Zoom does not make moving people from space to space when you're not, if you're only the host can do it, and it's super annoying.
Yeah.
Was our learning from when we experimented with that one solution to this challenge that we're speaking about.
Well, but didn't you also do the one where you had instead of putting on a Zoom webinar, you guys had a Zoom meeting? And so you were able to clip to certain audience cameras throughout and I think that's another way to do the connection that you were talking about, Danny. And I have a question about, one of the things that's tough for me to watch theater is that I have to take my computer off outside of my little office-y bit, and I have to put it, somewhere where my husband and I can like watch together, but we're still stuck on this little screen. If there's any way to like send directions out to the audience members, basically how to connect to the TV. I mean, just watching Hamilton, it's so much easier to see it on the TV as opposed to having to watch it through screens. If that's been a thing.
Yeah, that's how I've watched. That's how we watched the Lady Scribblers, and like we've watched friends' performances on our big TV. It does open it up to your family more, and it's fun. And if you, I mean, I personally don't know how to do it, but people in my household do, so it's quite doable.
There's a dongle for that. There's a little cord to connect to the back of your screen and attach your computer. I don't think it's Bluetooth. You can't Bluetooth it. I think it's physical. I just wanted to go back to what Danny was saying about
Patricia. I'm going to interrupt. Alex was going to voice something, and then could you give this that observation? But I wanted to make sure Alex had a chance to voice.
Thanks, Claudia, and I'll pass it right back to you, Patricia. So I did on Friday go and see Free Street Theater's production of Wasted, and I thought what they did was really great. So they sold their tickets through Eventbrite. It was free, donation, or paid, all the options, and the Eventbrite page sent you to Zoom, and they used that as the welcome lobby, and they had multiple staff members there talking and communicating with us and really creating that feeling of audience members talk to each other. And there they gave us kind of like what the pre-show would be, speech would be in person, links to programs if we hadn't already gotten them, any other additional information we needed, and then sent us over with a link to YouTube for the live stream. And they said, exit out of here or stay here if you have the internet capacity. If you ever get lost, you can come back. The lobby will be open the whole time of the show. And once the show is finished live streaming, come back for a Q&A here to this lobby. And I thought that was just a really warm experience.
That sounds cool.
Go ahead, Patricia.
I can't follow that, Alex. That's a great example. I can't wait to look that up. I just wanted to go back to the beginning of the pandemic when Queer Nightlife did their celebration of the Radical Fairies, where they had a contained, obviously they had, it was just DJ, but it could have been performers, and there were selected audience members. There was people that had already been, you know, pre-registered or whatever. Therefore, this is in the days before Zoom bombing protection happened 2 months ago. And then they had the live Twitch stream. So if you were inside the Zoom, your dancing or your reactions to the party were very much part of the Twitch. And the Twitch was a much wider audience. There was, oh my God, like thousands of people on the Twitch stream watching. And even though you were in Twitch, sometimes I was in the Zoom, sometimes in the Twitch, but if you were just in Twitch, you still had a sense that there were people representing the live audiencing experience for you, even though it wasn't your face or your moves that were up there. And I don't know if that's possible to do with theater, but for some reason this week, the loss of live audience, seeing other audience has been absolutely profound. And I personally saw the National Theatre's Midsummer's Night's Dream that was very much an interactive, very close up in the round piece. And I was watching, yeah, Shakespeare, yada, yada. There was a Shakespeare going off, but the audience's faces lighting up and delighting and, touching someone when they saw. I mean, I was crying the whole way through. And I think we have to include strategies for the liveness of audiencing. And Alex, I'm going to look up that option you just recommended.
Well, that's where I thought the State versus Natasha Benina was so cool, because it actually gave the audience a role as the jury. I think they're doing one more performance of that next Sunday, and I highly recommend it. I always forget the name of the company. I know I put it in there before.
Luckily, we've got a link to that production in last week's meeting note.
Right.
As always, I and other members of the cohort are wildly Googling whenever you name something specific and trying to put that specificity into the notes. So we love it when you join us in the notes and drop your own links. That's gorgeous and beautiful. Today's notes are full of great resources. Super excited. Thank you so much for chatting with us about various invitational strategies for getting people to your digital productions. You know, we touched a little bit on this burnout, fatigue, and I actually wanted to find out more about what is happening with our audiences and quarantine and those. That feels like a future conversation for the future. We talked a little bit about chat facilitation, Zoom bombing once again came into the conversation, social distance staging. We said goodbye to one of our international cohort whose country is doing less quarantining, and we are very happy that she is going to be, they are going to be able to be safe in an office. That's exciting. We talked about screen caps, lighting, lots and lots of resources for that as well, understudies, so many things we talked about. Colleagues, I'm going to hit stop record. I look forward to seeing you all next week. And as always, if you want to stay and help us plan next week, you totally can. I'm going to hit stop record now.